Our first speaker today is Hee Jin Chung from University of California, Davis, and is a PhD candidate. So if you're ready for some paws, claws, and personality, let's find out what makes each cat tick when the toys start to move. Hee Jin, over to you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, great. I wanted to start by saying thank you, Georgia and Laura, and everybody who is associated with the organization team for letting this happen and for allowing me to talk virtually today. So today, my name is Hee Jin, and I'm going to be talking to you about our project on exploring connections between owner-reported management factors and cat response to a standard moving toy. Cat owners are highly encouraged to play with their cats for various reasons. That could be due to play being a form of environmental enrichment for cats. Interactive object play can also encourage safe expression of natural behaviors such as stalking, chasing, pouncing, and other hunting-related behaviors. And play between people and cats can provide a source of consistent positive social interactions. So we know play can be a positive thing for cats as well as potentially for owners, but something we don't understand as well is why some cats are inherently more playful than others. One study in 2021 found that cats that were provided outdoor access were less interested in play, which is interesting. So they exposed cats to a standard object toy and found that cats that were provided outdoor access were less responsive to this situation. But it still leaves some questions, such as what other factors could potentially help explain their interest level in playing. What about cats that were regularly played with? What about cats that have a history of hunting versus not? So are cats that are exposed to the real thing, the real prey, are those more likely to be interested in a simulated play session or not? So we attempted to address some of these gaps by exposing cats to a standard moving object toy with the aims of looking at their response to this toy and connecting that with various factors such as management factors like outdoor access and frequency of play, their hunting history, as well as the owner's subjective rating of their cat's playfulness. We predicted that, as Piari et al. Found in 2021, that cats that were provided outdoor access would be less interested in this toy or would be less responsive. We also predicted that cats that were played with more frequently would be less interested because they're essentially getting it out of their system. We also predicted that cats that were known hunters would be less interested if they were already exposed to real prey, that they'd be less interested in something that moves like prey but isn't quite the real thing. And lastly, we predicted that cats that were rated as more playful by their owners would be more interested. In other words, the owners would do a good job being able to assess their cat's playfulness. For this study, we recruited adults living in the US who is a caretaker of at least one adult cat. And we distributed this recruitment survey in August of 2024 via social media using snowball and convenience sampling. And in total, we received 121 owner cat dyads who responded to the survey and then participated in the whole study. And they each received a package with the same standard wand toy with a feather attachment and some written and video instructions, QR code for video instructions. In the instructions, they were directed to move this standard wand toy in front of their cat in a consistent sideways figure 8 motion for 2 continuous minutes while filming. So here's an example of some of the cat videos that we received from owners. So on the left, you'll see a cat that is extremely interested, so running after the toy, often jumping. In contrast, there were also cats that seem interested at first, but then quickly lost interest, and for the rest of the trial, just stared into space. So from those videos, we extracted the following information, the following behaviors that were all duration, latency, or frequency. So first, we measured the amount of time the cat spent visually oriented towards the toy. In other words, the cat's head and eyes facing the toy, and the amount of time that they spent not oriented towards the toy, as well as the total amount of time they spent in direct contact with the toy, either with their mouth or their forepaws. We also measured their latency to lose interest or look away from the toy, as well as their latency to physically walk away from the toy. And lastly, we measured the number of times that the cat made one paw swipes at the toy, as well as two paw attempts at capturing the toy with their both forepaws simultaneously. And 3 observers were trained to code these behaviors from these videos, and they were trained to the inter-rater reliability metric of 0.8 using Kappa and ICC. And these observers were blind to the survey variables of interest that I mentioned earlier. And for analysis, we first ran univariate analyses using Kruskal-Wallis, and then built linear regression models, including some of these factors that we talked about. So let me share with you some results that we found. First, this probably shouldn't come as a surprise for those of you who have done survey research or who have distributed surveys, but the majority of our participants were women living in suburban areas who were between 25 and 54 years old. And the participating cats, the majority of them were between 1 and 6 years old, obtained from a shelter or rescue, living either by themselves or with one other cat in the home. As a reminder, our aims were to connect the cat's response to the standard toy and their various factors such as management, hunting history, and the owner's rating of playfulness. And the outcome variables, so their response to the toy that we measured, were as follows. So the ones that I measured before. So each of these variables were tested separately. So first, taking you through the univariate analyses, on the y-axis, you will see visual orientation in seconds, so the amount of time the cat spent visually oriented towards the toy in seconds. On the x-axis, you will see the different degrees of outdoor access. So controlled includes catios and leash walking. Uncontrolled is, as it explains, no control of the outdoor access, and indoor only. And we interestingly found that there was no correlation between the outdoor access and the amount of time the cat spent visually oriented towards the toy. And weirdly, we found similar patterns in all of the variables that we were looking at, the main variables of interest that we were looking at. So regardless of frequency of play, their hunting history, and the owner's rating of their cat's playfulness, there were no differences between those different levels in terms of how much they were interested in playing with this toy. So yeah, in other words, none of our main variables of interest were significant. And this was also true when we tested these explanatory variables against other outcome variables, such as duration of no interest, latency to walk away, number of total attacks, etc. We still built linear regression models with the same outcome variables that we listed before, and the explanatory variables. Some new ones that we included here that I haven't mentioned so far are availability of similar toys. So if the cat was exposed to a toy similar to the one we used in the study before, and how frequently the cat received a new toy in the home. And we also included some cat demographic factors, such as how old the cat was and how the cat was obtained. Through model selection, we were left with this final model. So we retained only cat demographic factors in the final model: age, method obtained, and hunting history. And the only outcome variables of interest that were significant were visual orientation, total duration of no interest, and the number of swipes and two-paw attacks. Interestingly, age was a significant predictor in predicting how much time the cat spent visually oriented or not oriented towards the toy. In other words, more passive engagement. And the way the cat was obtained was a significant predictor in predicting the number of attacks that the cat made, whether it was one paw swipes or two paw attacks. So on the y-axis is still visual orientation in seconds, and on the x-axis are the different groups of cat age. And we found that only the 1 to 2-year-olds were significantly different from the 11+-year-olds in terms of how much time they spent visually oriented towards the toy. And this was also true for the other variable that was significant, the other outcome variable of duration of no interest. And in terms of the number of capture attempts or the two-paw attacks, we found that cats that were directly obtained from a previous owner, so rehomed from a previous owner, made more active attacks at the toy compared to cats that were obtained from the street. So some key takeaways, we found that first, the response to the standard toy was not related to outdoor access in this population, outdoor access, hunting history, or the owner's rating of playfulness, but that younger cats watched the toy for longer than older cats, and cats that were obtained directly from a previous owner made more active attacks than cats that were obtained from the street. However, one thing I wanted to point out was even with the final model with these variables retained, our adjusted R-square value was only about 0.2, which suggests that about 20% of the overall variance in the outcome variable was explained by the variables, the explanatory variables that we kept. So another key takeaway was that our models still poorly, even though we might have had some significant factors, the overall models still poorly explain the overall variance in the cat's response to the standard toy. So that begs the question of what does explain the overall variance? And something that we did find, as you could remember from the 2 videos that I showed you, that there was immense individual variation among all of these different cats. So our next step is to look at that individual variation and to see if that variation is consistent. So today I only had time to share with you the results from the first trial, but all of those owner cat dyads were invited to participate in subsequent trials for repeated measures. So we are currently in the process of analyzing the data from trials 2 and 3 to assess not only between individual variation, but also within individual variation, and include individual ID as a factor in our models. Additionally, given that we had a lot of outcome variables that were potentially collinear, we are doing a principal component analysis to reduce those variables into principal components and perform linear regression using those components. And with that, I'd like to acknowledge our wonderful undergraduate interns, my 2 labs, Animal Welfare Epi Lab and the C Lab, the Center for Animal Welfare at UC Davis, and the Animal Welfare Institute's Christine Stevens Award and Jasper Shields Award for funding this research. And thank you.